So, beating burnout in 2026. Gosh, I tend to do a well-being webinar on January every year. And every year you kind of think, oh gosh, it's only going to get better, but it looks even more challenging when I look at the stats every single year. So it just goes to show that we're having to keep on powering through. But we absolutely can do that. And I've got some new insights. I've gone to the CIPD recent culture. I always look at their survey every year, which comes out sort of November, October, November. I've got that data. And also, right at the end, I've got hot off the press some data that we ran at Actus over the Christmas break, asking HR professionals what their biggest challenges were last year and also what they thought they were going to be next year. So I'm going to share a couple of facts on that at the end. But if you'd like a copy of that, we'll send that out to you as well. So it's made quite interesting reading and sort of supports this whole topic. So let's move on with this. I've already sort of alluded to this, but many of you, I recognise your names, will have met me before. My name's Lucinda. My background is corporate learning and development. I'm a chartered psychologist, and my day job is founder and CEO of Actus Software. I host a podcast, the HR Uprising, that's been going for nearly 6 years now. So there's some great content out there. So if you haven't found it, do take a look. It goes every other week now. And also I'm someone who's very focused on how to be a change superhero. I'll mention my hobbies actually. I don't these have been on these forever, but actually in terms of my own well-being, if I didn't play netball and tennis, I think I would be climbing the walls. So for me, one of the ways in which I try to look after my well-being is by having something. It's not for everyone. Some people go running, some people meditate, some people read. But one of the things that for me is quite important to avoid burnout is having those ways of actually recharging. And I encourage you to think of what your aspects are. In fact, tell me in the chat, any netballers out there, any tennis players, or how do you recharge when you're looking after yourself? Actus, if you haven't come across this before and you might be thinking about something like this going forwards, we are performance management experts, but we don't just do performance management. We've got a solution which supports performance management, learning management. More and more organisations are looking for a learning management solution that supports CPD, compliance and performance. We have 360 feedback. So we've got a real holistic system that can fit into any HRIS. So that's how we work really well alongside other HRISs. On top of that, in 2026, I'm increasingly going to go back to doing more training and consultancy. And I'll mention that at the end because it's one of the ways in which I find that I really, I feel like I have, it's part of my purpose, but I get greater insight into what everybody's up to. So that's something that I'll mention too. So if you're looking for people to do leadership development training, whether it's myself or a member of the team, that's something that we also offer, but we perhaps don't shout about as much as we should. What we're going to cover today is we're going to review the latest CIPD wellbeing insights and what that might mean for your people strategy in 2026. We're going to focus on more than quick fixes. So when I've talked about this before, it might be your netball, your reading, your sort of classic wellbeing initiatives. But the findings that come out of this year's CIPD survey show that quick fixes aren't doing what they need to do. So we're going to look more deeply and more strategically about how we can avoid burnout for ourselves and for others. Empowering line managers is a key theme. And how can we help our line managers to spot early signs of potential burnout and support wellbeing in their teams? Talk about setting realistic goals and boundaries and how you can maybe have a personal wellbeing plan, things that you could do to have a balanced and resilient 2026. So that's our focus for today. Starting off, as we often do, setting the scene before I do a poll, just setting the scene in terms of the things that we've seen. The headlines from the CIPD survey was that average sickness absence has reached 9.4 days per employee, the highest on record. That blew my mind, actually, because in 2019, it was something like 5.6. Halfway through COVID, it was 7.2. And you've got to bear in mind that people are home working quite often as well. So they're not even necessarily, going off sick altogether. And it won't surprise you that the leading cause for many is mental health, ill health, and that's what the listed cause is. They argue that arguably the having an aging workforce is playing into it, but heavy workloads of people feeling overwhelmed seems to be the number one cause of stress-related absence. Now, this is where this starts a theme that will come through increasingly, which is about work design. Incidentally, talking of podcasts as well, if any of you listen to the CIPD podcast, this current one will be out tomorrow, and I was on that last week, and we were talking about this topic as well last week. So tune into the CIPD People Pod, I think it is. We had Bruce Daisley and Faye Wallace, and we had a looking back on 2025 and 2026, and this is very much something that was coming through as well. So thinking about this and how you're currently approaching well-being in your organisation, it's always good to kind of get a sense of where we all are, because no one's got this, no one's got a magic wand for this as far as I can tell. So find out where you are in terms of this. Let me just pop my poll up here. So let me know what your organisation's current approach to well-being is. So would you say it's mostly reactive? If somebody seems to be stressed, you might refer them to occupational health, or if you're a smaller business, you come up with something ad hoc. Are there some proactive initiatives where you're going out and you're maybe doing some well-being training or training managers on it? I mean, comment if you've got something there in terms of this. Or would you say that actually you're really thinking in terms of the way work is designed, the way work is rolled out, that you're thinking consciously about this? And if you are doing that, I can see a couple of you have said it's embedded into how work is designed or rolled out. I would love it if you could put in the chat some examples of what you're doing there, because that is the biggest challenge. So if you've gone for that one, do tell us in the chat give us some inspiration. If you're not sure, that's fine too. So hopefully 69% of you have had chance to do this. Yeah, anything that you go, just let us know. Any ideas that you've tried that's working or that you're planning. We're all friends here. It's not competitors here. It's all about it's about well-being. So please do share in the chat what you might do or something you might recommend. Does anyone else want to complete the poll? So up to 69%. I'm just going to leave it open for 2-3 seconds, and then I'll share where we're up to. Okay. I'm just going to end the poll and share the results. So you can see that, unsurprisingly, it's kind of a bell curve, isn't it? No, at least no one's not sure. You all know exactly where you are. The reality is that a couple of people are starting to get really embedding it into how work is designed or rolled out. I'm hoping they might tell us in the chat. I haven't seen it yet. Thank you, Katrina, for starting the comments. Some proactive initiatives. So this is maybe thinking, is that about training sessions, or is it more strategic than that? That's the interesting thing. Or is it literally ad hoc? We have to do it when we have a problem. It's hard to get ahead of it. And I think given how quickly absence is, the issue is escalating, it wouldn't be surprising if most of us are feeling reactive in terms of this. So just summarising some of the thoughts and findings here. I'm going to stop sharing the poll so it's not in your way. The summary, and you can go and get this, by the way, from the CIPD website. There is a continued marked increase, 9.4 from 7.8 in 2023 and 5.8 in 2019. That's a lot, and that's worse than during a pandemic. We've already mentioned mental ill health is a top cause. Minor illnesses are the main cause for short-term absence. Well, that's not that surprising, 78% with mental health close behind, but stress is a real cause of short and long-term absence. So often it's the stress, it takes a long time to get people back. So the good news is that lots of businesses have got well-being on their agenda. They've got even well-being strategy, and they see it as being on the senior leaders' agenda. But the real issue that comes through on this survey, and it is echoed in the survey that we did at Actus over Christmas, is that lack of line manager skill and confidence is the top challenge. Add into that a concern, I think this is a real risk in terms of employee engagement. I don't know why this is, other than maybe people being remote. Maybe is that people feel work is more transactional. Now you can see, and that job quality has regressed. You could see that connecting. There's a logic there in terms of people not feeling a sense of belonging if you're not around the people that you work with physically as much as you used to be. I can see that could be a correlation. Again, interested in your thoughts here. Flexible working it's a double-edged sword. So it definitely provides opportunities where people might have less stress in terms of their general work-life balance. They can maybe get stuff done and concentrate when they're at home. More if they've got a bit of a sniffle, they don't have to come into the office, so they don't have to take time off. Yet you've got that, and sickness absence has increased. It does make me ask the question, how many sick days would people be having if they had to be in the office 5 days a week? What do you think about this? Does this echo what you've got in your organisations? Let me just take a moment to give you a chance to digest this and comment. And let me just have a quick look down here. Got you. So some of you started to do some training, and now you're looking at more of a strategy in terms of that. What would go into your strategy, Katrina, in this? Wellbeing leave. Oh, that's an interesting. Wellbeing pages, Thrive app access. So giving people the tools, Stefano, looks like to do that. And wellbeing leave being almost just sort of the old days might have been a pajama day, is it? Just people having a day where you can recharge. What's wellbeing leave? Tell us what that is. Harriet, you're being proactive. You're a small business, so you can do that, and you check in. So you actually talk about it, and the measure is resilience more than well-being. So how resilient are you feeling? And different things can tap into it. So it's that having that real check. Quite interesting that. So that is exactly what you want managers to do. So your small organizations and directors get together and you have an honest conversation about how you're feeling. And that in itself is therapeutic probably and recharging and can prevent problems. So that's so important that people talk about things. Gemma, at your organisation, you have a quarterly wellbeing topic, and this quarter's mental and emotional resilience. Great. So you're giving them tools and toolkits, and getting people engaged and getting managers to take. So you're really getting the managers to do something with it and get them to do that. Wellbeing risk assessments. So some real tools you've got going on there, Gemma. Did you say embedded into how work is designed, or are you talking about that's proactive? Because it looks like there's quite a lot going on there. Manager capability to be part of this. So some great things going on that you're already doing. And again, anyone else who wants to ask questions of those people who are doing things, if you've got ideas, do network within the chat there. Great. And Chloe, you're doing sort of things as well, quarterly speakers, bringing up those things, and they're broader than just work, breath work, nutrition, financial well-being. Excellent. So there's lots going on. It's making sure that we're not just scraping the surface. The challenge I think we've got is that issues are progressing almost as fast as we're putting in things to help with them. So the key insights, I've got 3 key insights from the CIPD survey that to save you reading it, obviously you can go and read it. 57% of respondents actually had a standalone wellbeing strategy, which is great. So they were doing things in terms of that. So strategy is improving, but the execution isn't as much as you might want. Still, lots of people feel that they're reactive. What they sort of say this means, though, is that to really make a difference, because a strategy on its own doesn't do it. So you are doing it, I think, and Gemma, workload is always challenging. Absolutely. That this is the thing. We can offer people yoga and breath work, etc. But if a line manager continues to overwhelm, or if you'll continue to be short staffed, which in some areas you just can't do anything about it. I imagine you're working in the NHS or something like that. You're often there's so little you can do, you're under resourced. The key area for those of us on this call who can influence it is the area to work on is workload planning. And by workload planning is helping people to prioritize with the support of their line manager what can realistically be done and in terms of things, because pretty much everybody feels they've got more work to do than can be achieved. So how do you prioritize and feel that you're getting some sense of achievement as opposed to overwhelm? So it's managing that, and that's where we need managers to be able to do it. That sits alongside classic performance management in terms of goal setting. So setting and agreeing realistic goals, manager behaviors. So is the manager continuing to pour extra work on there, or so it's just got to be done? Or is the manager going, actually, you're right, we can't do both. So this is what needs to be done first. Let's adjust this objective to make it realistic. So really, it's realistic performance management. And often performance management is used as sort of managing underperformance, but it's really what we're talking about here is line managers having the insight, confidence, coaching skills, and empowerment to say, right, what can be done? What is achievable under the circumstances? Breaking it down and recognizing that person delivering to the best of their ability and not overloading them. And that's not all managers feel able to do that. I'm going to come back and look at your comment in a moment, Harriet. Do keep the chat. I can come back and look in a moment. So line managers are the biggest leverage point that you've got. Apparently, only 30% of organisations currently train managers to support mental health. I can see some of you are, so well done to you. So you're in that top third. But where managers are trained, 73% feel confident having more sensitive conversations compared to 57% where no training exists. I mean, I don't see a big difference in that. I think that's quite not as much as you might expect. But certainly what you do want is your managers to feel that they are able to engage and to support. And so it may be about how supported they feel as line managers as well, how empowered they feel in terms of managing their workload. But what we're saying going forwards is line managers are basically a risk to your organization or an asset. They probably always have been, but where we're talking about well-being, I don't think we've thought so much about that, but it definitely links into engagement as well. I'm just going to look at what Harriet said. So Harriet says, you mentioned staff engagement. In recent resilience work with a large organisation, you found that the key issue is a loss of sense of purpose, linking staff work with organisation, especially with change and restructuring. That's really interesting because that resonates with what was said in our survey as well. So change was the other issue, but that loss of sense of purpose, that fits with people feeling that work is transactional. So, both being restructured, you feel disconnected from the organisation, from the people that you work with. That sense of belonging and sense of purpose is probably one of the things that recharges people and allows people in difficult circumstances to pick themselves up because they feel that what they're doing is worthwhile, and that's recharging in its own right. So if you haven't got that, then you can see how it's definitely going to tie into engagement, and all of these things fit together really. Workload is the elephant in the room, and again, it's not surprising, is it? Heavy workload is causing stress-related absence in 41% of organisations. And the problem with that is it's a vicious cycle. If you've got people off with stress-related absence, there's more work for the people left in the team to deliver. But they're saying that where we're focusing on resilience over workplace design, we're kind of moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic. So we've got to get deeper and go, what really can be done? And when we think that organisations are under pressure, they're cutting staff. We've got to be realistic about what work can be done over what time frame. And I think that's easier in a small organisation potentially. But the bottom line is, if the workload is unrealistic, no amount of meditation or yoga is going to fix it. And if we break the person, it's not going to get done at all. So we're much better to break down the workload and make sure it's manageable and achieve certain things well, the priorities. It's about prioritization and managing that in terms of expectations. So it's about us moving from quick fixes to a well-being culture. And it's not saying that the well-being days and training isn't a good thing, but really what we need to do in 2026 is empower those managers to think about, is that work realistic? Actively engage with people to help them prioritize, set boundaries. So, for example, in our software, you're able to prioritize an objective and work out where they are relative to each other. So it's not saying not everything is equally important. Obviously, in an ideal world, we'd like everything to be done within the time frame, but not at the expense of the people that we work with. So helping to have those conversations about what's truly important. The classic Covey or the Eisenhower matrix, important versus urgency. You increasingly see people that, it's always been the challenge where people can conflate what's urgent with importance. That's common, especially when you're stressed. But increasingly, that the more that goes on, the worse it gets, and the more the urgency culture prevails. And that's when, we've all been in the point where people start to then zone out and you start almost wasting time. So you become in a less, if you when you got into Facebook reels or Instagram reels, that's kind of quadrant 3, which is basically you're doing something that's not important and not urgent, and it swallows a load of the time up. So people need to feel resilient to be able to focus on what's truly important, and line managers need to be able to help people with that and spot if they're getting into that burnout phase where they're almost going at arm's length and they stop being effective at all. So how can we spot burnout early, and what can you teach your managers to do? Well, get them to recognize early warning signs. Those would be things like changes in behavior or communication, appearing to sort of have presenteeism or always on patterns. Are they slightly withdrawn, irritable, tearful, reduced confidence, or sort of minor absence, just feeling a bit detached? So what basically things like that, that's where people are behaving differently from their norm. And as a line manager, you need to know what their norm is to do that, to recognize it. But this is also kind of classic performance management anyway. So not just about well-being, it's identifying if someone's going to go off sick or someone's going to leave, where they're disengaged. It's really just saying, is that person in, in it or not? And it's not always about the work. It may be something external, but certainly as a line manager, if we can have early conversations, we can support people and give them that support and guidance, there's much less chance of it escalating to a long-term absence. And that's what you really want to avoid. So we need our managers to be able to sort of say, notice sensitively on what's changed, to have that empathy, what's making work harder right now, what control have we got over priorities and workload. So helping people to manage these things, coaching them to think about their priorities and their workload so that they feel able to cope fundamentally. Your business, Chloe's got a meeting-free Friday afternoon, which applies all year round. Nice for people to get on top of things before the weekend, so you can just get your head down and sort things out. So we're not saying that managers need to be therapists, but we want them to be early detectors. So it's really about making sure that they spot things early, and they have the confidence to address it if they spot something. We know that pressure to meet targets can be a top cause of stress. Obviously, we do want people to have performance objectives and targets because that also gives people a sense of purpose and direction, and it helps your organization to be effective. But it's about making sure that people are working on the right things. So that's actually an interesting thing. So pressure to meet target is a top cause of stress. But if people don't have any clarity about what's expected, that can also stress them out because they feel like they've got to do everything. So give people clarity about what's expected. That's your workload clarity. And give them the flexibility to do the work when it suits them, with it meeting for your afternoons, as much as possible. Give them empowerment and autonomy over their workload. If somebody wants to get up and crack on at 7 o'clock in the morning, but then wants to take a extended lunchtime, if that doesn't affect their ability to meet with the people they need to meet with, is that okay? It should be, really, as long as they're getting the job done. So helping people to understand what the outputs are that they need to achieve, by when, give them priorities. And this is, of course, I'm talking to you, but actually our line managers need to agree priorities and don't micromanage them as to how they do it. Give them the priorities, and if they achieve that, that's great, but just give them the support to be able to get away from their desk, to talk to people, to work flexibly, whatever it is that helps them to feel in control and recharge while delivering as much as is realistic. So get your managers to learn how to think about capacity-based goal setting as opposed to just totally business-based. Come up with stop doing lists. So, if there's certain things, classically in lots of organizations, and this is interesting with things like AI now, are the things that people are doing that actually they've been doing forever, but they don't really add value. So taking a step back, sometimes people do a report because they've been doing this report for the last however long, and it's just what they've always done, but no one's reading that report. So is there an opportunity to spot things versus so to spot these things that they need and switch them off, as opposed to just doing things for the sake of it? Always check, is whatever it is that they are doing, is that adding value? Does it need to be done? Does it need to be done monthly, or could it be done quarterly? So, life moves on really quickly, business moves on very quickly, and often we hold on to things that we've always done. But is there a real consequence if we let go of that thing? Can we stop doing that for a while? Would it really matter? So those sort of things are worth just being aware of. Normalizing boundary setting conversations, and that's I'm talking about boundaries in terms of workload, in terms of when you work. So as in, I don't expect you to work 48 hours a week to get the job done, right? Now, if you want to work, for me personally, if it's someone who wants to do, let's say someone who wants to work late and take some time in the daylight to go and walk the dog or whatever they want to do, that's totally fine by me, because that's a good way of doing it. But I'm not saying they should work all day and all night. The boundaries should be there, that the workload should fit within the working day, the hours available. And definitely helping people to say no in an appropriate way. Say, I haven't got the work, I haven't got the capacity to do this within that time frame, to negotiate, as opposed to just let things just pile on. So those are things that managers need to support people and allow them to do, and say, I don't think I can do this in this time frame. Can someone else do it? Having that facility. But not all managers have that style, and not all managers have experienced that. So therefore, not all managers model that communication style. So in terms of practical wellbeing plan, what might you want to do? We want to educate the people, all of us, as in terms of our own workload, to set our own boundaries, to access help and support, and manage our energy, not just our time. Managers, we want them to spot issues early on, have confident, supportive conversations, and be prepared to adjust the workload fairly and appropriately to make it manageable. And at the top level, we need to think about the work design. What are the overall business priorities? Are they achievable? Are people in the right roles, and those sort of things as well fit into it? But how are we communicating those performance expectations, and what are the business priorities? What are the must-dos in a time when there's always more that we want to do than we must do? What order do things need to come in terms of our priorities? And make sure that leadership behaviours absolutely echo this. See that well-being is important, that it's productivity, but not at the expense of the people. Resilience and stress management, I think, was it Harriet, you said you talk around the table about how resilient people are feeling anyway, which is a really good thing to do generally, and having that awareness about how resilient we're feeling. And it varies from different circumstances. Sometimes we're really resilient because I've had a great night's sleep, or you've done some exercise, or things are going great at home. But sometimes people are just feeling generally under the weather. You're a bit run down, you're bored, something's going on at home, you've got family issues. So other things can play into how resilient we feel. But we want to help people think about how resilient they are and make sure that they've got more bounce back ability. And some of that's a mental aptitude as much as anything. But sustained pressures that people have had over recent years, I don't think we can ignore the fact that if you turn on the news, it is absolutely frigging doom and gloom. So maintaining resilience in that environment, in fact, turning that off as much as possible, is not a bad thing. So in top of the world outside of us, whether it's UK or the States, there's lots of not healthy for our resilience things going on. If our organisation is finding it difficult as well, and the language and the body language and all those things are also feeding into it, then it generally it's harder for people to be resilient. And we don't want to fake it, but we do need to try and get people to develop habits of self-care as leaders and managers. We need to not lie to people at all, but be realistic and be as optimistic and as positive and constructive and practical as we possibly can be, to drive things forwards and to feel positive. Now, that said, I'm focusing this on organisations. Most of you here are HR. Typically HR, I haven't posted it here. Dr. Jo Burrell, I imagine you've seen it. I've had her on the podcast. She did a HR leaders burnout report last couple of years, and HR honestly really have got to look after ourselves, because it's not a good story. People are really, really under pressure. So this is worth reminding ourselves of. Where are we personally in relation to the pressure performance curve? Because if you go too far the other way, you can sustain it for a certain amount of time. And I've had lots of people on the podcast talking about burnout, and they often just don't see it coming. They think it's fine, until it's not. And so this is just one for you to think about for yourself. So, are you bored? Are you in a job where actually the pressure's not there in an appropriate way and you're bored? Are you in a comfort zone, which is fine, but maybe you feel you're not really learning, or a little bit that's not exciting you? So that actually in itself can be a bit draining. Are you in stretch where you feel like you're learning? Now that's potentially, between comfort and stretch, is potentially an optimum place, as long as you are not permanently in stretch. Because the problem is, if you're permanently in stretch, can then link into strain, And then before you realize it, you become exhausted, you have poor judgment, poor decision making, and it can then switch into overwhelm. And the problem with going into something like overwhelm is it's like depression, it's not easy to get back up. I mean, I think that kind of image works in some ways, because if you can spot yourself just as you're tipping over strain, you can recharge or take some time out, and pull yourself back into stretch and comfort. You can almost like climb back over the mountain. But if it tips so far that you have a collapse or an overwhelm or a burnout, then actually that takes an awful lot to recover from. So it's difficult to pull yourself out of it. So let's see. So where a few of you still participating, let us know where you think you are. I don't know what you're saying, by the way. Don't worry, it's all anonymous from your point of view. So hopefully not too many of you are in overwhelm or strain. But interesting to think what you're doing about it. Boredom in itself isn't great either, because that can be draining. Unless you're really recharging, you've sort of quit and stay. That's the classic where people are bored in a role, they might quit and stay in a job, but maybe it's time to go and do something more interesting. Or what can you do to change it, to recharge, unless it's suiting you for now. And let's have a look. So again, unsurprisingly, we've got a kind of bell curve. So almost 50% of you are in stretch. So that's okay. But I guess the question I'd say to you is, how long have you been in stretch for? And how long is stretch okay? And would you recognize if you are moving from stretch into strain? And that's the key. Those of you in strain, what can you do now before it becomes too much? Can you put a lid on it? What can you do for you to reduce that workload, to manage that, to make sure it doesn't push you over the edge, and to make sure also, if you're in strain, what's it doing for your home life? If you want to motivate yourself, lots of people are really loyal at work, which is great, it's admirable. But as Stephen Covey said, no one lay on their deathbed wishing they'd spent more time at the office. So if you're in strain due to work and you've got young kids or things and you're taking out at home, or you've got no time for yourself, then you're not recharging out of that environment. So think about that holistically, right? What can you do to get things off your plate, to say no to those things, to make it achievable? And if you're in overwhelm, seek help, get some mentoring, talk to your manager, take some time, look after yourself, because our mental health, our physical health is so important. And so Sarah's saying, recognizing where you are, and maybe that even just doing this little exercise personally for you. If you've gone, oh, I hadn't thought about it, this is maybe where I am, I can do something about it. Sarah, when you say you can do something constructive about it, and anyone else where you found yourself in strain or overwhelm, top tips, what have you done about it to get yourself back into more of a healthy space? Do share them. That might just help someone else on here who's just thought, oh my goodness, actually I'm about to keel over. So tell us what helps you in that situation. So hopefully we'll get some top tips coming through. It always takes a while when I ask a question for people to do. So chuck your top tips in for getting yourself back into stretch slash comfort. For me, it is definitely taking time out and physically exercising. It's me making sure I walk the dogs in the morning, even if it's pouring with rain. That really helps me just get a grip. But I'll see what I'm sure you've got some great suggestions in there. So do pop those suggestions in. So the uncomfortable truth is that sometimes there is simply more work than the organisation has capacity to deliver. And work redesigning chronically understaffed systems. I don't think there's anyone here from the NHS, but I just think that's you just actually, there isn't always a solution. So you can't always just fix the workload problem. You can't. So you've got to prevent the workload problem from breaking your people, because the problem is if it breaks your people, then the workload problem gets worse. So it's a vicious cycle. So sometimes we just can't do everything. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. And in some organisations, it's a bigger issue than others, and that's why there is so much stress in places like in healthcare and the NHS and things like that, particularly because the purpose, people absolutely feel like it has a knock on, and it links to what people work in those environments to make a difference to people. That's how it affects them. But many of us don't work in environments where it is literally life or death. So then it's about going, it is work. So let's make sure that the workload problem doesn't break our workforce. That's, for me, is really key. So what do we want our leaders to do? We want them to name the capacity gap honestly. appreciate if we had a couple more people in the team, we'd be able to do that. So what can we do? What can we prioritize? What do we need to let go of? Trade-offs need to be visible and shared. We adjust our expectations, not just the effort, and we need to protect people's recovery as a performance issue. Really look at that as very, very important. Takeaways for 2026. So wellbeing is no longer about sort of benefits and perks. It's about how work feels. Our managers are our biggest wellbeing investment. They're the key. And if we can prevent burnout, it's cheaper, kinder, and more effective than reacting to it. So our 2026 wellbeing strategies need to focus on capacity for people to deliver, clarity, and culture. And by culture, I mean people being able to renegotiate priorities and not being it's work at all costs. It's about not breaking our workforce. I'm going to just whiz down before I've got my last couple of things, seeing what you're saying. So just recognizing it is important. Walk away to think, write a priority list, ask a manager to help you prioritize, ask for help about what your priorities are. Yes, absolutely. If you can do, I think, yes, you mean meditation, don't you? Mediation might help too, Katrina. Meditation, if you can do that, I would like to know how to do that better. Breath work is really key, isn't it? Because that helps actually physically reduce your heart rate and bring things down. Exercise, sleep, the right food, getting outside in nature, absolutely. Interesting, Harriet saying how much burnout is related to people being afraid to leave when the job market is fragile. Yes, again, on that CIPD podcast I was on last week, that's one of the things as well as people, it's really, really hard to get jobs. So you can have people that are quit and stayed and not motivated to be in places. It's all quite tricky. So yes, difficult. So people can feel almost trapped, which doesn't help either. Lisa's saying, okay, good one. To address your overwhelm, you're working to understand your personality type and others. So maybe managing differently, being more open and protective over your time. Yes. So not knowing what your personality type is, Lisa, but some people are, really helpful, amiable people, right? Who you could ask them to do something and they'll absolutely help you out. So they end up taking on stuff that's not their workload, where there's others who find to go, that's not my job. And so they actually are almost naturally protective. So that does definitely play a part. I mean, the whole thing also about some people, I know that ADHD, there's lots of people who are being diagnosed with ADHD or have, you hear much more about that sort of thing in the workplace now, but certainly people who've got short attention spans, they flit around, so they actually distracting themselves as well. So you're overstimulating. That can mean that you're then not focusing on what the important stuff is. The fact that we have things that are triggering us at all directions, being able to focus and therefore break the back of important tasks, that in itself can make people feel a lot better. But when we feel overstimulated and with a million things going on and many distractions, we're not productive. So helping people to learn how to properly focus within their protected time, that's another thing. So that's all, and that doesn't have to be ADHD. Lots of us are easily distracted, aren't we? So just thinking about those sort of things. But again, it's down to the individual. So at least you're saying for you to think about yourself. What we really need is line managers to help people to have that insight into their strengths, their challenges, how they can be more productive. So I mean how they can be more productive, not at the expense of their health. So just a couple of final slides, and if anyone's got any other questions or comments, pop them in the chat, please do. We will send out this survey that we did we only did it over a week or so, but I was really interested in the results. So we asked, and this is just a snapshot, we asked what people found their biggest challenge was in 2025. And you can see that actually leadership capability / line manager effectiveness came through as the top challenge. Performance management consistency, so in terms of managers managing performance. So again, that kind of goes into line management behaviour. And then a bit about culture and transformation. So that's what people found was most challenging. And in 2026, what people thought was going to be their biggest challenge, again, was leadership capability, line manager effectiveness, a bit about culture, and managing change and transformation. So that made me think, it got me thinking last week when I was going down to this. I'd already said that one of my goals was to do a bit more consultancy, get a bit more hands-on, because that gives me personal value and to sort of, I find it rewarding. And so I thought it would be interesting to look at, is there anything new in management development? I'm thinking about developing a course which is helping managers to manage workload. How do you do that? What are those questions? Because lots of us have been around forever and you think, well, it's kind of common sense. Um, but is it common sense? Do people really know how to do it? So I was thinking about how is that something that people would be interested in more so? Let me see whether I can remember where I put my poll here. So I was going to post up here. If anyone, and maybe I'll just say reach out to us when we email you. Oh, this is it. What I wanted to do is just sanity check with you. Is that showing? Do you think that these are the same things? I mean, this was only about 50, 60 people. It was really quite a snapshot of people, but it was decent. It was a decent considering how quickly we put the poll out. Do you see these as the same challenges that you've got? And no pressure at all, but I thought, because I was talking about the topic, if any of you might be looking out for other people to, you might go out to people to do leadership development or consultancy, and you'd be interested in working with myself or someone in the business, let me know, because we'll just reach out and you can, it's no pressure at all, but I want to do more of that in 2026. So just get in touch or let us know if that's the case. But interested to see if you're seeing this same sort of thing. And actually, if anyone in the chat has anything that you think you're going to be looking for, what do you think about doing training managers in how to manage workload? Because I do things on managing objectives and, the classic performance management, but do they know how to have a conversation about rejigging priorities? It's slightly different from time management. So interesting what you think might be of interest for yourself, for your business, or for others. I thought I'd take the opportunity to pick your brains as you were here. So thank you so much for joining. You notice that Grace has been popping things in the chat the whole time. She will email out to you with the links and the video links and all of these attachments. You can just respond directly back to her if you've got any questions or want any contacts. Our next topic is going to be about objectives that drive performance in 2026. I might build something more into this in terms of workload management in terms of this next one. That webinar would be suitable for line managers. So if you feel you know what it is, but you've got line managers who benefit, do feel free. Thank you so much for joining.